Hello, I'm Connor Gotro with my friend Eric Van Bergen right here. We're out here at the Karen Crow Farm in Louisiana, walking around, observing nature, and we're just talking about the ego and all kinds of stuff about what we want to do in service to the world, in service to our community, to create some offerings about bringing the community together for the purposes of self-actualization, healing our internal circumstances, then figuring how we can go out into the world and heal the external circumstances. So that's what we've been talking about. We're getting some quantum downloads right now. It's a little bit of a cloudier day, had some rains earlier. The ground is nice and wet. You can hear perhaps the katydids and the crickets making their beautiful sounds in the background. And yeah, we're just taking a walk. So yeah, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the ego. What is the ego? What do you want to know about it? Why should you know about it? And what do you do with that information? So Eric, you got any thoughts you'd like to
Yeah,
share?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're just talking about ego because this is such a fundamental thing for us to understand while we're on this self-actualization path. And one of the ways I think about ego is all of the belief systems and structures in our minds that are constructing our whole view of what we are and what the world around us is, and what is especially topical to it is it's this what's creating this boundary that I feel between myself and the people around me, the nature around me. What makes me feel separate from everything around me? Like what is that's creating that separation? Because we can understand at a scientific or philosophical level that we are the universe. There's nothing that's separate in my body from the rest of the atoms around me. It's all really the same substrate that's flowing in and out of itself. So what's creating this sense of separation? Is there any separation at all? These are really good questions for us to ask ourselves while we think about what the ego is.
Yeah, absolutely. So my catchphrase that I love to say is separation is an illusion perpetuated by conceptualization. So the mind, the nature of the mind is a dissection tool, a mechanism of intellectually labeling, classifying, and in order to label and classify, something must be dissected. And so the mind will find these points that it arbitrarily deems as a significant to create a mental sense of separation, and then we label it as a concept and we create this conceptual matrix that we're in. And that's just absolutely a requirement in order to have this experience of relativity, because our perception is inherently relative. We can only perceive a thing by perceiving what it is not, and we can only understand a thing by perceiving it in relationship to another thing. So, for example, you have the concept of the ocean, and then you have the concept of the wave. And so the mind looks at the ocean and mentally dissects the ocean into pieces called waves that come into existence when the ocean creates a certain geometry, right? So the question is, whenever the ocean makes a wave, does something actually new come into existence that did not exist before? And the answer is no. Nothing new is created whenever you see a wave, right? The wave is just something the ocean is doing. And similarly, right, are you something completely new that is coming into existence, or are you just something that the universe is doing, right? You and everything else is this continuous singular flow, and then the mind has this subjective relative experience through conceptualization, and then this conceptualization necessitates separation, and this is the mechanism of the ego, of the self. And it's interesting how our experience is so paradoxical in that we need to have this abstraction in order to perceive the essence, because the nature of reality being relative, we can only perceive the essence of reality by experiencing what it is not, being the abstraction of the essence of reality. So conceptual mental separation. So that's the pointing to the fact that the nature of our experience is entirely paradoxical. But backing that up to something more practical, a more practical level, why does the ego, or what is really meant when we say ego? Because we can talk about the ego in this sense of the most literal existential mechanism, and then we can also talk about the ego from this perspective of psychology, being that, or spiritual psychology, being that the ego is the aspect of the mind that perpetuates fear. And so whenever you're in the state of recognizing unity, right, then you're recognizing love, because whenever you see yourself as being one with something, then you love that thing because it's you. And whenever you see yourself as being separate from something, then that naturally generates fear, because it's unknown what its intentions or aspects could be. And so the belief in separation is the source of fear and the root of fear. And you could say the ego is the aspect of the mind that creates separation and then experiences and perpetuates fear as a result of that belief in separation. Whereas the true self is the perspective that recognizes the truth of unity, and then feels love and sees the truth of love as a result of this accurate perception and holistic perception. So I like to kind of break that down into, what is like this literal mechanism of experience that people might refer to as ego, and then what is this more practical definition of ego? Like, how can we use the understanding of ego to help us understand reality more clearly? And I think that's where it's very helpful to draw this distinction, as the ego being the aspect of experience that creates fear, as we would distinguish that from love. And so we can, whenever we experience fear or negative emotions, we can trace the beliefs. We can always trace the beliefs attached to these negative emotions and see their roots in separation. And so, yeah, that's some thoughts that I had about ego.
Yeah, I think a really important thing to mention here in this topic of ego is that ego is not inherently a bad thing. It's a really important survival mechanism for us to value our bodies and to value our own needs, to protect ourselves. Ego evolved in humans so that we would not, being out in nature, it's like there's actual danger around you, like for your physical body. So to understand that it's like, all right, to create this sense of fear of like a tiger that's coming up towards me is beneficial for my survival, because if I didn't have that fear, then I wouldn't even worry about the tiger approaching me. So it's valuable in that way, and it has its place. But whenever ego is getting into our relationship with nature now in society and our relationship with each other now, when ego is perpetuating war, when ego is perpetuating all this greed that's making us poison people and take advantage of people, and to destroy the ecosystems, to destroy nature, this is when ego needs to be examined, because this is creating so much disharmony on our planet that can be reconciled very quickly by just realizing that what we do to others and what we do to nature, we're doing to ourselves, because there's no real separation there. And this is proven in any sort of scientific or spiritual lens that you look at this. This is inevitably true of the situation that we're in, as we're all connected, we're all one earth experiencing itself. So yeah, ego, not inherently a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's something to honor and integrate, but not let it rule you. You know, it's like that Alan Watts quote that the mind is a good servant but a bad master. We definitely don't want the ego mechanism of the mind to be our master. We want it to be a servant for protecting our bodies, and yeah, just allowing us to exist harmoniously and peacefully in our environments, and value ourselves properly.
Yep, agreed. You know, there's a lot of different ways to look at the ego, a lot of things to think about when it comes to ego. You know, another one is that it's the mental act of identifying. Like I described earlier with the ocean, looking at the ocean and then describing a wave, identifying a wave. Whenever you identify a self, and then what you include in that self is key to knowing, okay, well then what's going to be the source of my behaviors? What's going to drive my behaviors? What's going to drive my desires, my emotions, my thoughts? Because all of those things are going to be completely dependent on what your identity is. So if your identity stops at your body and your thoughts, then you know that might lead you to do some things that are not in the best interest of other people. But then if your identification can expand beyond just your mind, your thoughts, and your body, then it can be inclusive of larger groups of people, or you know, maybe the environment around you. Then you know, that can lead you to act in ways that are conducive to the health and success of all those other things that you include in your identity. So you could say the ego is also more of a verb than it is a noun. You could say that it's really just an action taken on by the universal being, the self, in order to forget itself, to then know itself. So, you know, that kind of also explains why, you know, ego's not bad. It's part of the experience for an important reason. And it all just kind of depends on, you know, how you're looking at it, how you're describing it, and choosing to define it, and what's most practical for you at this point in time. So the ego, it's kind of one of those foundational things to one of those foundational frameworks to beginning that self work It's not needed at all. It's definitely not needed, but it can be very useful, especially if we're in this world of blaming ourselves for our negative thoughts or things like that. When we can see that, okay, all this negativity is actually unconscious, and the positivity is the real me, the part of me that's really conscious, then we can open the door for forgiveness for ourselves. But then we can take it a little too far, and then we can get too centered on blaming my ego for this or for that, and not taking responsibility or creating this complex split, when at the end of the day, the truth is we have to take full responsibility for everything, including our thoughts and behaviors. So if we're taking negative actions or having judgmental thoughts of self or other self, then we're going to want to take full responsibility for that, recognize that we are still creating that, and just as we create it, we have the power and the ability to stop creating it. So it's just one of those things that the more you think about, the more you read about different perspectives on, you get more accustomed to using the framework as a tool to expand your awareness of yourself, and do that real work of just becoming aware of what you're doing unconsciously and what you're doing consciously. And that's really the name of the game when you get down to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really powerful framework, and I feel like it's very correlated to the beginning of a lot of people's spiritual awakenings. Definitely was for me to start understanding ego and ego death, and this is why psychedelics are such powerful medicines for people. It's because they facilitate this experience of what it's like to experience life without the ego, and that's so powerful for understanding this metaphysical truth that it's all one. All reality is one. There's not two realities. There's only one reality, and you listening to this video, you are that. You are fully connected to God or source or nature, whatever you want to call it. It's all one, and it's all connected directly to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the ultimate truth that we need to recognize at the end of the day. If you can meditate on that, question that, inquire into that, really you don't need to do anything else. You can achieve it all through there.
And let ego be that tool. It's useful for us to identify as things. Like it's useful for Connor and I to identify as people who want to share this message with you right now. It's useful for us to step into roles to make this planet better. So, ego can be a very good thing there. We can let ourselves identify as these different roles to make the world a better place. But it's important that we also remember that at the end of the day, these are just little acts, like little plays that we put on, and it's not really who we are. We're always in a relationship to each other and everything else, and then that relationship will often take a certain story, and that's I think story, narrative, these are very commonly associated with the ego, because ego loves to use language and stories to create the separation of, like, this is this thing, that is that thing, and create the separation, the split, and create roles. It's like, you're supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. And it's all a story at the end of the day. And learning to see past the ego is I see in a lot of ways it's seeing past language, seeing past the stories that we tell ourselves. And that's why meditation is so powerful. So meditation, we can watch the stories of the mind come up without identifying with them and experience what it's like to be perceiving sensations without the stories attached to them. So it's these practices with meditation are so powerful for that.
Absolutely. Inquiry, along with meditation, is it's going to destroy every limiting belief, every assumption, all the unconsciousness. Inquiry will destroy it all. So I highly suggest, like, use that as your cornerstone, use that as your rock. Every thought auditioning for your approval, every emotion, belief, question it. What's the source of this? What is the origin of this? Do I actually know this is true? Based on what? And just spending time in that inquiry genuinely will be the ticket to unlock everything. So that would be my number one tip. And also, if you want to learn more about the ego from some really good teachers, I'd recommend Aaron Abke, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts. All have good frameworks, good lectures online. And I think that we did pretty good. Had a few good laps around the pond, didn't step on any water moccasins, and had some good discussion on the ego. So
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
thank you. Peace.
Peace.